Okay, thank you for inviting me, and I hope the presentation goes well. Even though Sydney is normally a very sunny city, we're actually in the middle of a thunderstorm with lightning outside, which I can see, but I'm hoping that that doesn't interrupt anything here. And I will share my screen and we will move from there. Please make me aware if I need to slow down at all. And I know that this is being translated, but if I need to actually adjust the speed of things, I'm very happy to hear that. Okay, so today I guess I've been asked to speak on one of my favorite topics, that of learning spaces, pedagogy, and educational transformation. I'll also give a bit of a disclaimer. Some of the images that you can see here are created by Midjourney, the AI image assistant, and I've had a bit of fun asking it to provide children from Kazakhstan, and also when it looks at the future building shapes, it came up with some futuristic ones for Kazakhstan in particular. For me, I've been in schools ever since I left school myself, basically. My father was a university professor. I was born in New Zealand, and I've been to schools myself in New Zealand, England, and also then Australia. And it was in Australia that I became a teacher, and I've been in schools either in Australia or Spain for 45 years. During that time, I've had the privilege of being a principal and of what's written up there on the screen as NBCS, Northern Beaches Christian School. I was the principal there during a growth phase where I was asked to grow the school from 250 students to 1,400. So that gave me an amazing opportunity to not only, I guess, explore pedagogy, but also the way in which the spaces that we needed to build might support the pedagogy that we had. During that time, I also founded the Sydney Centre for Innovation and Learning. That was basically a means by which I could tap into the talent of the teachers in the school and allow them to drive the pedagogic vision. More recently, after I completed my PhD in 2018, I was asked to join a project which was centered in Barcelona, Spain. And so since 2018, I have lived about half of each year in Spain and half in Sydney, and travel between the two. And I'm a co-founder of Learnlife, and I will sort of highlight some of the aspects of that story visually as well. I guess one of the things that's been important for me all the way through is that as the adults in education, we are the ones who have got the ability to make the changes. And I guess it's saddened me that so many education systems around the world stay static and don't change, when really it's our role as educators or as architects, as academics, to be the ones that lead the change. And I guess that, in the context of schools, if we fail to do that, not only are we failing the current students, but we're also failing the generations to come. I love this quote from Albert Einstein: "The world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking." That's another one of the Mid-Journey created images of what a classroom environment could look like in Kazakhstan, going along with that one. So the presentation today, I'm told that I have about an hour and 10 minutes to go on that one. So I hope you can bear with me. But I'll be looking at a bit of a brief rationale for change, because if people don't understand why the urgency to change, then perhaps they lose the energy to actually push through change in their thinking. So we're looking at why change the nature of learning spaces as they exist. We're looking at the role of learning culture, the way in which interactions and collaboration, engagement and agency are all part of that culture. I'll be introducing you to a couple of case studies. That's the Northern Beaches Christian School, NBCS, from Sydney, and then also to Learnlife in Barcelona. I'll then take you through some of the key considerations when you're thinking about designing or redesigning spaces, and also some of the implications for collaborative teaching and learning models. And ultimately, I guess, putting that package together as, because creativity will become the outcome of those creative, agile environments going through. So I am told that there'll be a Q&A session at the end, and that's fine. So I will just keep going through at this pace, and I guess I'd ask my translator to slow me down if I need to do so for any reason connected to the audiences. I loved this image when I typed in the potential for a future school in Kazakhstan. The picture on the screen is what Mid-Journey created for me, going through. And I guess it's fundamental now to think through, the issue of learning spaces. Why do we have to be interested in this? Why be interested in this? And I guess the answer, lies very intentionally with understanding and knowing the why. Because if we don't understand the why things need to change, then it's going to be very, very difficult to lead that change. And rather than looking through sort of endless justifications for research, there is a lot of research out there which looks at the nature of learning. There's a guy called Professor John Hattie. He's actually a New Zealander like me. He lives in Australia, and he's created some large-scale research which looks at the key components of effective learning. And when you look at that, a lot of that is connected to teacher feedback. It's connected to relationships. I guess, there is the research out there, but I thought what I would look at here is going to the World Economic Forum survey of, I think they surveyed over 800 organizations in multiple countries, looking at the future of jobs in the next 5-10 years. And this list came forward. The wider list that you can find courtesy of the web address there actually lists about 25 or 26 different core skills, but I thought we'd focus on the top 5 just for now. So there's the top one, analytical thinking; the second one, creative thinking; the third one, resilience, flexibility and agility; fourth one, motivation and self-awareness; and the fifth, curiosity and lifelong learning. I guess the question we've got to ask here is, how would these skills be learned if we continued with the traditional system of education? Because a system which relies on control and managing students and having fixed curriculum with mandated content is not going to be the curriculum that you need in order to unleash these skills. And I guess, when I first looked at this topic about 10 years ago, I was very aware that there was a big mismatch between what was happening in schools and what was required of schools. Here we are now, 8 years later from when I first started looking at this in depth, and it's all the more the case, that the need for change is all the more urgent, and yet the systems are failing to do that. The second list here is actually, I think, one that's of greater interest to me as well. So it's from the same report. It's now looking ahead to what are the skills that need to be sort of taught to people in employment, and looking at what needs reskilling and upskilling. And it's interesting to see, okay, the analytical and creative thinking have stayed static with this recalibration, but understanding AI and big data has jumped up, and that there's no surprise to any of us in the last 12 months, but it's jumped up 12 points in the scale created by the World Economic Forum. Interestingly, leadership and social influence have jumped up as well. And again, that doesn't surprise me, because if I had to note anything in the lifetime of my career in education, it's actually sadly being the lack of strong leadership who might lead or vision and lead change in all aspects of learning. And resilience, flexibility, and agility is still up there in the top 5, although it slipped down 2 places given the increase of the others. Curiosity and lifelong learning still being there in number 6. Technological literacy in there. Design and user experiences jumping up. You can read that list. It's an interesting list. Again, what does this mean for us when we're thinking about learning spaces and pedagogy and educational change? I guess the key question for me, one that's been missing in so many countries and schools, is there actually a pedagogic vision? When you talk to a government about their vision for education, I would say that in about 90% of cases, the answer comes back in terms of money and a budget. Politicians will say, we've allocated so much money to education in the next 5 years, or we're focusing on literacy and numeracy, which is such empty words when you talk about them in that political context, because it gives no context around what you're actually saying. And I think the big gap here that's critical between educators, academics, and architects is that there has to be a pedagogic vision which will drive things forward going through. And I guess behind that, we need to say, what is the future for young people of today? I've done a bit of research into Kazakhstan and found some really, really interesting statistics and facts and figures. And I guess in many ways, all younger people, under the age of 20, I would say, across the world, regardless of their country or their ethnic background or their culture or their socioeconomic status, they're going to struggle with the same issues. It's in the context of the world, the future is very different, and we know that AI has made an incredible difference within 12 months, and this is just the start. So we've got to think back. The students need to be at the centre of the vision equation for pedagogy, and you think, what is their potential? How do we best bring it out? And what is their capacity? And does the current system in any way limit that capacity? It's an interesting survey. Let me move forward. And then we've got to think about the schools. Again, another mid-journey created image of a future learning space for Kazakhstan on the right. Does the nature of the learning support the growing of lifelong learning skills and curiosity? Again, I would have to say, universities regrettably train teachers to be managers of a learning space, and ultimately don't put a focus on how do you grow collaborative skills. The focus is often on the short-term exams and improving results in the short term, and that, I think, comes at the to the detriment of lifelong learning skills and simply growing the concept of curiosity as learners going through. And so we've got to ask ourselves that question, does the experience of school need to change? And how might agile and adaptive spaces better support the learning? So I guess these are the core questions I will be throwing to you guys in Kazakhstan, just as I would throw them to anyone else in the world. Again, another great quote that I've thought about on many occasions. There is that mismatch between what's required in the 21st century workplace, and here we are almost a quarter of the way through 21st century. And it's a mismatch with the focus of education systems, which are still preparing people for exams rather than young people for the workforce and for a very changing environment going through. That's from one of the many McKinsey reports, and I haven't again seen anything that would actually change, I think, that perception, which I think is a very accurate perception going through. When I did do a bit of a internet search on learning spaces in Kazakhstan, this was one of the images that came up in one of the newspapers going through. And I guess, again, no criticism here, but I guess a comment that would say, ultimately, the current education systems worldwide, and Australia is no different, they follow an educational model which is flawed by design. It was established, 150, 200 years ago in an industrial context where the needs were very, very different. And I guess you'd have to say that it prepares young people for a past now gone. It's not preparing them adequately for this future that we're hearing about and we know is very, very real. So I guess, here's the first of a number of points where I want to challenge people's thinking. We can't teach people to be creative if we give them standard tasks. If our content is driving the processes of the classroom, the tasks are going to be repeated and they're going to be very standard, and we can't teach people to become creative if we do that. NASA undertook a really, really interesting survey that went over a couple of decades, where they measured the ability of 5-year-olds to be creative with paper clips. The challenge was, for the 5-year-olds, how many ways could they think of using a paperclip? And I think from the research, when the children were about 5, they could easily find up to about 50 different thoughts or ideas for the way in which you use paperclips. NASA then surveyed the same sort of people, and it was quite a large survey, over the next decade and a half, following them through school. And what was really, really sad is that the creative thinking of exactly the same people dwindled from, statistically, from about 50 down to about 12, down to about 2 or 3 ideas. So that, I guess, what it was showing was that the very system of school was actually stamping out the very thing that they were trying to do, becoming creative. And we can't teach people to be collaborative by putting them in competition with each other. The examination systems are ultimately highly competitive. And how are we as adults going to teach collaboration if the entire system is anti-collaboration and it's based on competition and it's based on solo performance? We can't teach people to be lifelong learners if we deprive them of self-exploration and the courage to learn. If we're not thinking of introducing methodologies such as project-based learning or passion-based learning, challenge-based learning, any of the methodologies which actually enable the learner to become more self-reliant and exploring and becoming curious about their learning, well, then how are we going to actually teach them to become lifelong learners, a skill that we know is critical? And we can't teach people to become empathetic and emotionally intelligent if we have them sitting in rows and we sort of remove the ability to be relational and emotional within the classroom context. If we're going to be serious about creating empathetic individuals, then it has to start in the classroom. We have to think about all the ways that we actually relate. That has actually an enormous impact. That's had an enormous impact in the way in which I've helped design spaces, and you'll see that in some of the pictures coming up. And we cannot teach people to be growth oriented if we are ourselves afraid of change. So if we sit back and say, give me the research, give me the prototype, come up with every reason under the sun as to why we shouldn't change, we're not going to teach kids to become growth oriented. So I guess those are my 5 points I want to hit home in that sense. So a little bit of terminology here. When I use the word agile in relation to spaces, I'm talking about space that can be easily reconfigured. And when I talk about spaces being adaptive, I'm talking about them being able to be used in multiple ways. And again, you'll see some examples of that as we go through. So a question that I throw back to everyone listening is, can you easily answer, what is your framework for learning? What is the culture of learning that you experience either in your school or in your workplace or in your college or university? I think they're very important questions, because we can't look at the connections between space and learning, space and culture, if we actually don't understand those issues for ourselves. And when we talk about space, I guess for me now, I'm talking about space in some very specific ways. For me, space in a learning community needs to be highly relational space. In other words, space where the emphasis is on relationships, not on control, not on compliance, where the space itself suggests interaction, where the space is intentionally non-hierarchical. And again, I can show you 2 moves that I've been involved in making that will come by ways of pictures in a little while, to explain what that means in terms of space. We want space that can grow collaboration. We want space that is highly engaging, and we want space that can grow learner or student agency going through. Now, in this slide here, I can see there's a lot of small print, and I'm sorry for that. So I'll sort of talk it through in just a general term. But at Learnlife, where I now, I'm the Chief Learning Officer in Learnlife, I was asked to come up with a framework for how the learning works. And so this is a very broad picture here. If you are interested, the learnlife.com website will be able to help you on that one. I've also created a learning bot on my stephenharris.me website, which is my personal website. If you go into the profile there, I can perhaps put that up into the chat line at the end, but stephenharris.me profile /profile. It's got a little learning assistant there, and I know that it actually can answer questions in Russian as well. Okay, so how do I see learning as working? Well, first of all, as I said, it starts with the relationship. If we know from the research that if there's not a sense of psychological safety, if there's not a strong sense of functional positive relationships, learning is just not going to happen properly. And there's all sorts of neuroscience which will support that. Now, with relationships in place, then purpose is the issue. Kids need to know why they're there. Now, even if they change their understanding of purpose 100 times in the duration of their school life, that's fine. But to have an understanding in every context of what is the purpose of what's happening. And if we're talking about growing lifelong learning skills, then people need to understand the specific sub-skills of that. What does that mean? And there'll be a slide showing that one in a moment. And it will also, they'll need to understand, well, how do you grow your autonomy to become a competent lifelong learner? So once sort of that background is in place, well, then it's to do with what's happening in the learning space, the classroom, or the learning experience. And I guess here, what's most positive is when the learning experiences are diverse, they're engaging, and they're personal. The next one here in the model, learning needs to be made visible. Now, in a traditional sense, that could be examinations. Yep, I understand that. We're working very hard to find viable and credible alternatives to examinations, and we're working with different universities to create that. And I think we're making a lot of headway. And there are other organisations in the world doing exactly the same thing. The Mastery Transcript Consortium in the US is doing that. The Rethinking Assessment group from the UK is doing that. But every school, every educational setting can actually make changes. And I guess here, the idea of how do we make a student's learning visible? And that can be in any way from presentations that they might give to research reports that they might write. But I guess it's a mindset that says we need to make learning visible, not we need to examine them. And ultimately, we want the outcome of any learning to have an impact on the world. You know, that I know that the institute that is hosting this today with its interest in ecology and environmental studies, again, we want the kids learning to be making an impact and a change in the world going through. Now, as I move into looking at Northern Beaches, NBCS here in Sydney, I do have to have a disclaimer, except for the fact that it's raining today. Sydney's climate is very, very different from Kazakhstan. I understand that, but the concepts behind the decisions that you might make about spaces are exactly the same. It's just that I made decisions based on the pedagogic priorities that we had as a school, and also bearing in mind the climate going through. So that's just an important one. So I had the opportunity as we were growing the school, and it was an intentional growth in numbers, to build 8 buildings. And the last of those was a project that was significantly large. I guess I worked out that although we had built a number of new buildings, the biggest problem for me was that we had still a couple of the older shaped buildings right in the heart of the school. And for me, the heart of the school needed to be the community and the relational heart. So therefore, we had a significant project where we radically transformed that centre of the school into a different space, and you'll see that in a moment. The brief that I gave the architects, I said I wanted the building to be high and wide. I wanted it to be filled with gardens and light. I wanted lots of fresh air and space. I wanted it to be both formal and informal. I wanted community space. I wanted the building itself to teach sustainability and to grow awareness of environmental issues. And I wanted it to sort of feel inside, outside, and outside, inside. I wanted to blur the lines of nature and the walls of the building. Now, even in a different climate, I don't think it needs to be any different. Obviously, you might build walls differently and place things differently, but that was the brief that I gave our architects. Again, this one I know will have to be translated because it's an image. So I was asked to talk to the architects about how I saw space, and I saw it as a fixed and fluid notion, having an enormous impact on how we feel and think, and the very core of our experiences of life. And the challenge for schools is to identify the different spaces that it's inhabiting and to draw these together in meaningful ways so that the learning can focus forward, enabled through technology, and not get dragged backwards. I'll just leave a bit of space there in case that needs to be translated more specifically. So with that brief to the architects and that notion about space, the architects came back to me with this vision, and they said that they were going to provide an active canopy which would reach out to protect, connect, energize, and inspire a learning experience unlike any other. And I thought, wow, if the architects can understand the vision for what was in my head and actually grow it already before we even started, then the building would be somewhat amazing going through. So that we started with this idea of this active canopy going through. And I guess for me, the idea of the canopy also came from having been at Barcelona airport in Spain, not connected to my new job. But the new airport in Barcelona has a giant canopy, and underneath that, every activity takes place. And it's an amazingly acoustically strong canopy, so that even though the rest of the building is glass and tiles, it still works very, very well as a space. And that's where my initial thought came through. The architects then created the image of what we're looking at, and it was going to be a combination of fixed and enclosed space where the entire roof was solar panels, and that the building itself would actually generate its own cycles. It would generate its own power cycle, and it would generate its own water cycle. So that it was a very large, I guess, vision that we had for it. Now, let me just adjust my screen here. I'm going to sit back and allow you to see a video which was shown on national TV about the project. That sort of gives you the best idea of it. Hang on. There we are.
Dr. Harris, unfortunately, there is no
Dr.
sound
Harris,
coming.
we
Maybe
don't
you can
have the
comment
sound,
this
and
just
for
by
us
yourself.
to hear the sound, you should make the screen share, choosing like the box, like share the sound of the computer, because we see the video, but it's without sound.
Okay, so let me go out for a second. So where do I go?
Colleagues, we have a video with subtitles, therefore we hope that you will be able to read the subtitles even if we do not have the sound. And in the chat, you could see that it was shown in the chat, and you could watch it with subtitles. And in order for you to hear the sound, you will have to be in the English channel in order to listen to our presenter, who then will broadcast this sound of the video.
Okay. Is there a button here that I should be pressing? I'm not sure. Otherwise, the sound is not critical because the subtitles are there. Yeah.
Yes, please launch the video. The sound is not critical at all.
Yeah, and I can talk about those things. Okay. Yeah.
It's constantly there. It reminds us that we're part of a large world. Technology designed to up there to support our thinking, and whether it's the large screen, whether it's laptop screen, whether it's mobile device, about everything together. This is more than just great architecture. Everything you touch, everything you experience is there to enhance learning. It's the same outstanding example of holistic design.
Okay, I'm assuming that people can hear me again. So I can talk you through some of that, even if it was the sound didn't come through. So I guess the core concept here was to create this giant canopy that would create the heart for the school. And I wanted it to be something that was suitable for all ages, from 5-year-olds to 18-year-olds. But more than that, I wanted the building to actually teach the kids about sustainability, about energy cycles, and I wanted the building itself to be able to bring people together. So the ultimate design here, I mean, there are many other buildings in the school, but this is like the core, the heart of the school. It's got 18 gardens as part of it, and as I said, the entire roof acts as the generator for both the water and power cycles of the building itself. Some of these angles here that you can see, again, a choice to actually bring in the, I guess, that futuristic sort of pathways in a second level, so that you know it was actually connecting different parts of the school with 2 levels. That actually saved congestion. Down the bottom there in that darker grey area, that was actually a cafe. And again, we were able to invite parents and the community into the school with adequate child protective sort of signing offs and everything else. And what we actually developed was something that felt like a giant lounge room, because all people in the community felt comfortable to come in. And that had an incredibly important impact on the nature of the learning that was happening. The other thing that the space did, and I'll talk about this one as we go forward as well, is that it created spontaneous space where any class, any teacher could bring kids out and do something different spontaneously as they thought about it as well, going through. It was intentional to sort of feel like a co-working space. The part here on the right was actually for senior students when they didn't actually have scheduled lessons going through, but it also was a space where we invited parents if they wanted to come in and work as co-workers in the space, so that the learners, the students, actually started to feel like, you know, that they weren't in a school, they were actually co-workers in a larger learning environment. Again, just some images to sort of show what it looked like. You can see on that little booth in the middle, we chose as much as possible to make surfaces writable. So the table there is like a whiteboard, and also on either side of that space, it was used in the same way. And again, one of the brief was to bring the outside inside and the inside outside, and that was sort of done by making the doors absolutely operable depending on the weather and the climate going through. As I said, this was obviously suitable for Sydney. This common space is where we had a large screen. It was actually powered by solar power. What we didn't know when we built it was it's actually the largest solar powered screen in the Southern Hemisphere. That was never an intention, but it actually happened. This became a great space for events and community, and for all ages to sort of enjoy during the day. And the screen was on all day long. We would be showing David Attenborough type nature movies, again to give the constant notion of a wider world to the children going through. The second screen there actually was one that gave them information, a little bit like an airport terminal, giving you information up front. There's different angles there, and you can sort of see how it works in the different levels, and it connected all the other buildings that we had built in the previous 10 years as well. Even the foyer, when we talked about adaptive space, space that can be adapted to multiple uses. So this is the foyer, the reception. Now, obviously, it's only used a few times during a day, during a school day, because we didn't have people coming and going the whole time. But this space could be used for functions. We used it for musical performances. We could use it for meetings. We could use it for parent gatherings. We could use it for a whole range of things. So again, very intentionally looking at a little bit like a hotel lobby, because we could use it in different ways as well. And as I mentioned, the whole roof becoming a solar conductor. What was critical in the design is the concept of visible learning, so that all spaces can be used in different ways. And one of the outcomes of the use of whiteboards in multiple areas for the kids was that mathematics became a very visual language in the school. Now, up until then, maths only really existed in textbooks and in kids' exercise books, but suddenly we started seeing mathematical equations appearing all around the school as kids use the spaces to sort of to visually work things out. I love this one here because it's a senior student who's not only writing the plan for an essay on the table, he's got a printout there of research that he's using, and he's got his laptop. And I guess it's again, when you're talking about developing the skills of agile thinking, the spaces themselves lent to that very easily. So we wanted co-working space, and I did away with my office as a principal. I said, no, I don't actually need my own office. I can be allocated one of these little spaces here with the rest of the team, and then I was largely mobile during the day. So that was a choice, I guess, to help the other staff, the other team members, and ultimately become very visible amongst the community as a person that was accessible going through. So that was part of it. And again, all spaces that were designed were sort of designed around the idea of people working together, and little nooks and crannies to support that. And there's a couple of other examples there. And that, again, the table, we designed the furniture with a furniture company intentionally, and again, as writable as possible. Community space, again, intentionally creating spaces where people could get together, whether for formal classes or informal. The space down the lower level used constantly for performances, assemblies, meetings. And I mentioned beforehand the idea of spontaneous space, spaces where a teacher could suddenly say, okay, we want to do something slightly different, and they could immediately find it without having to sort of had booked it beforehand. And for me, the concept of professional space in school is really important, that the students shouldn't be in a world that's artificial. They should be experiencing spaces that are actually the same as they would in industry. So we designed a number of spaces. So this was the Sydney Centre for Innovation and Learning itself, the building. It was like a co-working space. It was our first one. In the music room, we took over the storerooms, and we changed them completely, and they became jam rooms or recording studios. The music room itself became a little bit more like a nightclub going through. It had an incredible impact on the quality of the music that was actually being undertaken by the kids. A mathematics classroom, again, for me, the key thing here was having a lot of space that could make maths visible, and that's why there's so much whiteboard in that context. The science space, the vision for this one was, just as you walk through a duty-free area in an airport when you come going to a plane or coming off a plane, we thought, what would happen if you made science something that you walked through during a lunchtime or a break? And it could be closed off to become a discrete space, but it could also engage kids' interest in science at all times of the day. So that was what we did there. And our design and technology space was one that I guess was a little bit like an architect's office. It was plenty of space for model building, for creating different areas, for writing things down, for designing things. For younger learners, again, we wanted to bring them together on what's called the campfire here. You know, you can actually have up to 60 kids if you wanted to have a little gathering, but just as easily you could break out, as you could see, into the other areas into smaller groups. So the spaces were very adaptive. And the space here was one of the last ones I was in charge of before I finished my role as principal. This was at one stage 2 small staff rooms and 3 storerooms, book rooms, and we removed walls, we remodeled it. We wanted to give the senior students a space where they felt more adult and where it was very easy to hold debate, conversation, dialogue, and this is what we came up with in that space. Okay, I'm just going to change my English translation screen here. So I'm going to switch now to talking about Learnlife in Barcelona and the spaces there. So again, I talked about beforehand that, you know, when you talk about lifelong learning, you've got to teach the sub skills of what does that mean. And we're looking at a whole range of skills here. So there's self-management, self-efficacy, self-awareness, self-responsibility, self-regulation, self-determination, self-reflection, and self-direction being some of them. Behind that, the learners, the kids, the students actually need to understand, well, how do I grow each of those skills? And that's been one of the driving concepts in the space that we've built at Barcelona. We've also focused on, you know, what are the different methodologies that teachers need to become proficient with? And we've researched across the world, and we came up with about 28 different types of methodologies. Now, these ones are all downloadable from our website, learnlife.com. We're not expecting every teacher to know all 28 of them, and it's a growing list, but perhaps that they should focus on sort of half a dozen each, so that they start moving away from being the teacher out the front. That if they don't actively learn different methodologies, then nothing's going to change. So a second video, and again here, I think there is actually an English translation down the bottom, but it's one that you can watch later on because it's on YouTube. But it will show you the spaces at Learnlife.
But the fact that we could do something that correlated, and I showed my friends and he showed his, and we could create something together. And it wasn't like hard or boring, like it was actually fun. And I think that's important, like know how to work with other people, and especially with friends.
The teachers or the learning guides are a lot here. They are happy and excited. If I would have to describe Learnlife with 3 words, it would be amazing, fun to learn, and not as strict as possible.
So me looking from where I was before to where I am now, it's massive, like a dramatic change. I would say it's a learning space that people go to learn more skills for adulthood and the future instead of learning 100-year-old things. I think I've been growing the most in soft skills with people and collaborate.
I really love to make creativity and accuracy. So my idea with that was like also like creating meaningful. So we started work here with the camp animation, stop motion, and it became more like, I don't know, like one of their favorite places. say Learnlife is community, it's openness, freedom in education, and it really is finding your life's purpose.
Okay, that gives you a taste for what Learnlife looks like in Barcelona. Probably a couple of interesting points here. The space itself, at one stage before we gained it, was the space for 160 lawyers. So that was a whole sequence of different lawyers' offices or booths, and we renovated it and obviously changed it dramatically for there. And it was a very low budget. Again, we didn't have a lot of money, so that was a question of removing walls, building in some of the studios, and as much as possible keeping costs to a minimum. So I think it's important to recognise that. So these, again, similar ideas. We know spaces for collaboration and for adults to be thinking about things. It's got this central area which creates a bit of a natural plaza down below, which makes it very easy when we have performances, because we can have 2 layers of people watching in that one there. But it's actually a sequence of studios. So there's a multimedia studio, a design thinking studio, a music studio, a food technology studio, a robotic studio, a textile studio, and light manufacturing studio. They're sort of the main ones that we have, plus there's spaces for art. And so a lot of the work, about half of the day for the learners, is actually in the different studios as well. We also had some awkward spaces without light, and we looked at what was the role in plants in those sort of places as well, and getting the kids to understand the importance of plants and providing oxygen for areas. And Learnlife has a primary school program for 6 to 11-year-olds, and it's about 25 minutes south of Barcelona city itself. It's right on the beach, and the 2 modules here are built to European Passive House criteria, so that they are carbon neutral houses themselves, and they're also ultimately relocatable going through. So as I said, this is the view from the front gate. It's right on the beach, literally, going through. That makes it both very warm in summer and also very chilly in winter going through. But the passive house structure actually works very well. It's sort of nestled in an area that has got, it's got a mountain range not too far away. It does look very green here, but there are apartments and houses all around it in that context. And as I said, it's right on the beach in the sand. Different images there. And we had to then solve space issues. So we built an under shelter hacker space, where like a maker space for kids going through, I guess like an outdoor workspace for kids as they're designing things and creating things. Inside, it's what we would call democratic space. Again, there's no offices. It's everyone in together. On the left-hand side there, low budget, we have a library. We got kids speaking about 13 different languages, and the main languages that the program runs in English, Spanish, and Catalan. And so there's a little library which have been sort of created by parents, which support all of the different languages that the learners have. And again, it's highly agile. You can change things around within the space, and it can be adapted to multiple uses as well, as you can see in the images here. That little one there, that little sort of mobile house with a whiteboard on it, when I go there, that becomes my preferred working space, because I can actually do Zoom calls and other things. I guess you don't need to have an office as a leader going through. And I guess in the context of where we are there, you can actually hold community meetings outside going through. So that's the Eco Hub. So now let's move beyond the spaces that you've just seen and think about, well, what are some of those key considerations when you are designing? And we've got about 20 minutes to go before our Q&A. You know, the way in which the physical space supports the learning philosophy is significant. That's what I guess I've been hoping to say. And just looking now quickly at what are some of the key components when we're designing learning spaces. Now, again, I'm conscious that this slide here is in English, so I'll go through slowly. So what I've created at the top is like a formula for how I see space working. So it needs to be agile and it needs to be adaptive. It needs to be transparent. You can see through all of the spaces. There's no sort of hidden areas. It needs to feel like it's a professional space. The acoustics need to work, and it needs to have a level of diversity, you know, that you can actually do multiple activities in it. And if you've got that, then the space is going to work in synergy. However, if the space is not agile, if you can't use it in different ways and going through, well, then it's going to lack purpose. If the space is not easily adaptive, it's not going to be cost efficient. I would say that if spaces aren't transparent, in other words, you can't see into every space within the building, and this, I've been to so many schools in America, especially where you can't see into the classrooms. I would say the space, it's not worthwhile because you've got no ability to build community and you've got a whole lot of hidden groups. If you don't create professional spaces for the kids, well, you're missing an enormous opportunity. If the acoustics aren't strong, then it's only going to frustrate and annoy all of the users. And if the spaces don't cater for a diverse level of interests and curiosities, well, then it's not going to meet needs going through. So that's like a formula for thinking through how do we make space. And this is now the second one for how do we create those necessary conditions for the successful use of those spaces, agile spaces. Well, here's the formula here, that if you have clear vision, you have people with a strong growth mindset, you've got high insight into how space works, you've got a focus on the individual, the person, you've got a future-oriented pedagogy, and you've got a high collaborative capacity amongst the team, well, then you've got a high potential for success of spaces and also creating spaces that are more relevant. However, if you've got no vision, you're going to be fairly directionless. If people haven't got a strong growth mindset, there's going to be resistance to the changes and to the spaces. If people lack insight, they're going to be naive about the spaces and how to use them. If you haven't got that focus on the individual and the relational side, well, the experience of learning is going to be very inconsistent. If there isn't clarity around the future-oriented pedagogy, well, I would say it's going to become irrelevant, the school, the space. And if you're not growing high collaborative capacity in every area of the organization of the school, well, then the whole project or the whole process of learning is doomed. So I guess that's, you know, my thinking after the experience that I've had. So there are 5 significant dimensions that I want to talk about. There's physical space, virtual space, because we can create online space where learning can happen. There's pedagogic space, there's emotional space, there's relational space. So we need to see space in many, many diverse ways, far broader than we normally do as well. And then we've got to think about, well, what needs changing? Well, it's not only our practice that should change, but our spaces and culture should more closely match the world that the students have already entered. You know, they've been born into this world that's different from the world that we were born into as adults when we were young. So what are the implications? What are the implications for collaborative teaching and the learning models? Well, our beliefs and our values and our choices, they are highly significant. So the spaces that we inhabit as a school send all the cultural messages, because culture is a mixture of those beliefs and those values and the actions, the events, the choices that we make. going through. So those things are all highly significant. And what do I see as the key to all of that? Well, it's pedagogy. It's understanding what's our vision for how we want the learning experiences to happen in the spaces. You know, what do we want to gain? That's why at Northern Beaches, I loved it, that the building itself taught kids about energy cycles, that they saw a building that created power, that they lived in a building that generated its own water, that they actually lived in a space that was getting close to carbon neutral. It's what I love about the Eco Hub at Barcelona. You know, it is Passive House certified, that it's a space that is carbon neutral. So the kids are actually learning right from the word go some of the key thoughts that they need to have as they move into a world where they actually have to tackle environmental and ecological issues going through. So it is all about the pedagogy. It's as simple as that for me. When it comes down to space design, architectural design, you have to have clarity around where do we want to take the learning in this organization? What does it look like now? What is it going to look like in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time? And how are we going to grow the capacity of everyone, the adults, the learners, the students, the parents, to actually better cater for the changing world? And I guess this fairly simplistic equation here, or a graph going through, looking at beliefs, values, and choices. Now, as we're moving from a fairly rigid mindset, which is focused on the individual, the solo, and the idea of educating cohorts like batches of hens going through, as we're moving towards something that's more agile, collaborative, and personal, that's on the horizontal. And on the vertical, we're moving from a model that's traditional, that's control mindset, and where the insight into what you need for sparking off curiosity and engagement is fairly low. And we want to move towards something that's far more insightful, far more future focused, and far more empowering. And then as that happens, as you have both of those axes growing, you're going to move from something that is far more limiting in terms of creative energy and I guess what's actually happening to the learner, to something that's ultimately far more creative, intuitive, with a strong growth mindset. But you have to have all of those aspects sort of operating. And again, research is, this one's a very common one. When there are percentages given to this, but how do we learn? Well, sitting as I am now, and I apologize for that, but sitting in a webinar or a lecture will have some impact, but it comes down to the individual now reading more about things, watching videos, having demonstrations, having conversations, that they start experimenting by doing things, practicing things differently. And ultimately, as they teach themselves, they teach each others. It's a far more powerful model. So what space do you like? That's an interesting question that we should be asking ourselves as adults. I know that, I'm being a person born in New Zealand, if I go to any group of New Zealanders, adults, and ask them about spaces, I only ever hear that they like outdoor spaces going through. But when we think about it, we want to unleash creativity as an outcome of those creative, agile learning environments that we can create for the learners and change the model of learning and again, help a generation move forward. So, some final tips here. There's a guy called David Thornburg. He created the concept of developing spaces around these 4 ideas, around the concept of a campfire. That's when you can get the whole community together. A watering hole, that's when you might have a small group, 6 to 8 people together working on a project, or spaces which he described as caves, where an individual might work. And that could be just as easily a person sitting in a large area with headphones on, And then also real life spaces, so that life is a space that can be experienced. And to that, I guess I would add on 2 other concepts, that we need to have a mountaintop space, a space where we can celebrate success going through. And we also want to have a space where we can get our hands dirty, a sandpit space where we can actually practice things, where we can trial things, prototype going through. So 6 concepts of spaces there that David Thornburg talks about in his research as driving the nature of spaces in areas. And you can see that Northern Beaches and Learnlife are both built around those concepts, that all of those spaces sort of exist in different ways going through. So the question is, what's your lens for seeing space? Is it just purely physical, that you just see it in one sense? Or do you also understand that the physical space can also have virtual space, which is exactly what we're doing now? We're all physically located somewhere, but we're also connected virtually. So those 2 spaces have to be operating together. But are we seeing space as emotional space? Because a space has an impact on our emotions. And are we seeing space as social space? I think, so much space is wasted in traditional schools as corridors, which is, it's notionally social, but it's not. It's actually more to do with controlling and organizing. Whereas I guess that canopy space at Northern Beaches, that very large area that was just open, was ultimately social space going through. And we can throw into that, what do we see space as potentially professional space? Why do we actually remove children and teenagers from the rest of society? They should be experiencing professional space, preparing them for a community that actually has got people of all ages. And I love the concept of schools becoming co-working spaces where you can invite other adults in who are perhaps running their own organizations or their own businesses, but having them visible and children and teenagers seeing them as co-workers within the same space, and that concept of spontaneous space, which I mentioned. So just as we finish off, what are the spaces that have inspired me? I'm going to share a few. So this one is Nemo, which is a science museum in Amsterdam. What I loved about this space when I saw it is that the people in the white suits, there's a few of them walking around, they're actually all grandparents, and they're actually helping kids deconstruct and construct, I guess, people who have actually retired. It was just a lovely space, which was full of energy, and I guess for me it helped me change my thinking about the way in which space should work in a school, and that sense of productivity for kids as well. This is in the same facility. Again, the science areas for the children don't look like a traditional science classroom where everyone's sitting in rows of desks. They're putting on the lab coats. They're scientists already, and the spaces that they're using are as if they were professional scientists. And I love that one. This one is in Sydney. It's actually the redesign of a very traditional library for one of the universities. And again, they got different architects in to create different types of spaces. What I loved here was the strength of the color, but also the simplicity of the environment. Again, it just appealed to me and helped me think through the nature of furniture, the nature of spaces, and the way in which you could have areas for multiple people, like a collaboration of say up to 10 people, or you could have smaller spaces as well. And it was all in a converted space. This is in the same space. Again, another architect. They got multiple architects in to sort of create different spaces. This is where I started to see the use of whiteboards and on walls, on furniture. Again, very agile, very adaptive. This inspired me. This one inspired me. It's actually in New York. It's a shop, Italy, but it's more than a shop. It's actually it's a school, it's a community for chefs. It runs cooking classes, but it also, you can walk through and you can buy produce going through. And I guess, again, that for me really opened up my thinking about the cross adaptive use of space, that you could have multiple activities happening in the one space. And at different times of the day, that was very hard to get a photograph with only a few people in there, because it's absolutely packed out going through. There's another angle of it where, it's got restaurants, it's got spaces for cooking classes, it's got produce for sale, it's got everything in together. This one here is in San Diego, America. It's actually a renovation of a car park. So it was renovated into an Airbnb apartment, and I guess it spoke to me of, we can look at all sorts of space in a city and actually transform it in ways that perhaps we haven't even thought of. And I love this one here for that reason. This is the same space, again, transformation of a car park going into apartment space. This one is in Delft in the Netherlands. It's a library for the University of the Delft University of Technology. Now, what they were experiencing was that about 95% of all research was being done online and the books weren't being used. So they decided to create this incredible tapestry of books on the back wall, which you could access and you could still borrow, but it gave that sense of research and learning. But the reality is the space was given over to people who were ultimately accessing the information online. Again, it was inspirational. The next one, from the UK, I love this in a primary school. It started to get me thinking about, we can become creative. There's no reason why our spaces need to look boring and dull. This one's from the Design Center in Stanford University in San Francisco. Again, the idea of adaptive creative space that can be used for multiple things. I work in Rwanda in the middle of Africa a lot, and I love their innovation village, right in the heart of Africa, in a country that's recovering from genocide. There's incredible cultural shift happening, and they were just as aware in their entrepreneurial startup world of spaces needing to be different. This one's from Denmark. No, from Sweden, sorry. This one's from Sweden. And again, the idea of creating transparent spaces, visible spaces for all ages going through. This is from the same one in Sweden. Again, they created, I love the central little area there that actually had tiered seating on the top. They had a small area breakout space for a group happening underneath, and then the whole of it was a whiteboard that you can write on around it, apart from that little island that you can see. This one's in Iceland. It's the reception foyer for a hotel. And again, I love the fact that it felt more like a lounge room, and it can be used in so many different ways. Again, it inspired me about that concept of social space. That's the same hotel, creating spaces that felt very different. This one's from the Netherlands again. It's from a co-working space where they used old cars and different things to create private spaces. If you needed to have a Zoom call, well, you could go into the car and actually be sitting in that, going through, very quirky, going through more of those spaces from that one. Apple stores around the world. Why do adults all come into Apple stores and sort of queue up to join in the trainings and everything else? It's because that space is very well designed. It's